There is a moment every gardener knows. You are standing at the kitchen counter, holding something you are about to throw away. A handful of cold ash from last night's fire, a mound of wet coffee grounds, a small pile of eggshells from Sunday breakfast. And for a half second you think, I should probably put these in the garden. Then the trash can opens, and the moment passes. That half-second instinct is correct. But what most gardeners do not know, what nobody has ever laid out side by side in plain language, is that these three materials are doing entirely different things once they hit your soil. They are not interchangeable. They are not equally useful. And used on the wrong plant, at the wrong time, one of them can quietly stall growth for weeks while you blame the weather. 3 kitchen cast-offs. 3 completely different mechanisms. 1 4-week trial with the same plant, the same soil, the same water, and results that surprised even me when I measured the final height on day 28. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which one to reach for, why the other 2 still have a place in your garden, and the single mistake that cancels out all 3 of them before they ever have a chance to work. Most gardening advice treats amendments as a category, not as individual tools. Add organic matter. Improve your soil. Feed your plants naturally. The guidance is well-intentioned and almost completely useless because wood ash and coffee grounds are about as similar as vinegar and baking soda. And if you have ever combined those 2 things without thinking, you know that mixing the wrong inputs creates a reaction nobody wanted. The global fertilizer market pulls in over $230 billion a year. That number exists because gardeners keep buying products they do not need, because nobody ever explained what was already available in their own kitchen. Every week in North America alone, millions of pounds of spent coffee grounds, eggshells, and fireplace ash move from counter to landfill, while the same households spend money on soil amendments at the garden center to address the very deficiencies those materials would have corrected. The problem is not access. The problem is understanding. These 3 materials each target a different limitation in your soil. Match the material to the need, and the results are measurable in days. Get it wrong, and you can make things worse. But there is another way, a quieter one. The fertilizer industry pulls in over $230 billion a year. The entire business model rests on one assumption, that gardeners cannot produce meaningful soil inputs from what they already have. Wood ash, coffee grounds, and eggshells have a commercial value of essentially zero. There is no packaging, no distribution chain, no margin. No company profits when you understand that the potassium your tomatoes need is already sitting in your fireplace. No sales representative benefits when you know that the calcium your pepper plants crave is in the shells you cracked for breakfast. These materials disrupt the cycle not because they replace one product with another, but because they gradually eliminate the need for external inputs altogether. That is not a conspiracy. It is simply a financial architecture with no incentive to educate you. Here is a question worth asking before another shovelful of wood ash gets scattered blindly across a garden bed. What exactly are you applying? And what does it do the moment it contacts your soil? Wood ash is what remains after the carbon burns away. What you are left with is everything the tree pulled from the earth over its lifetime. Concentrated, mineral-dense, and immediately water-soluble in a way that most soil amendments are not. The primary constituent is calcium carbonate, typically comprising between 25 and 45% of the ash by weight. The secondary constituent is potassium, critical for flower formation, fruit set, and the hardening of cell walls that makes plants resistant to cold and disease. A single 5-gallon bucket of hardwood ash contains roughly the equivalent of 1 pound of lime and a meaningful fraction of the potassium in a standard bag of commercial potash. Dr. Ellen G. Harrison, researcher in environmental science at Cornell University's Department of Crop and Soil Sciences, has documented the liming effect of wood ash in acidic soils, noting that the material raises soil pH at roughly half the rate of agricultural lime, but significantly faster because its particles are finer and dissolve more readily in soil moisture. In her research, plots amended with wood ash at a rate of 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet showed measurable pH increase within 2 weeks of application. This is where the metaphor matters. Think of soil pH as a lock and nutrients as keys. At the wrong pH, too acidic, below 6.0, the lock sees. Calcium, phosphorus, and potassium are all present in your soil, but they are chemically bound, unavailable to roots. Wood ash turns the lock. It does not add everything a plant needs, but it opens the door so that what is already there becomes accessible. In our trial, the pot amended with wood ash showed the first visible acceleration in growth by day 9. Not the tallest by the end, but the earliest to respond. The soil it was growing in had a starting pH of 5.8. Wood ash, applied once at planting, raised it to 6.4 within the first week. At 6.4, phosphorus availability nearly doubles compared to 5.8. The plant was not being fed something new. It was finally able to reach what had been there all along. One caution that belongs here rather than in the mistakes section: wood ash is not for every garden. Blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, and potatoes prefer acid conditions. Apply wood ash to these plants, and you will lock out the very nutrients they need. Know your pH before you reach for the ash bucket. Coffee grounds carry a reputation they have not entirely earned. For years, gardeners have added them to soil under the belief that coffee is acidic, and therefore coffee grounds will lower pH and benefit acid-loving plants. The reality, documented in a 2012 study published in the journal Crop Science, is considerably more nuanced and considerably more interesting. Spent coffee grounds, the material left after brewing, not fresh unbrewed grounds, have a pH that typically ranges between 6.5 and 6.8. Nearly neutral. The brewing process extracts the acidic compounds. What remains is a nitrogen-rich organic material with a carbon-to-nitrogen ratio of roughly 20:1, sitting right in the optimal range for microbial decomposition. Dr. Christy Brewer, soil microbiologist at Michigan State University's Department of Plant, Soil, and Microbial Sciences, has studied the effect of coffee ground amendments on soil microbial communities. Her findings, cited in Frontiers in Microbiology, show that coffee grounds significantly increase populations of beneficial bacteria and fungi within the first 3 weeks of soil incorporation, including species in the genus Trichoderma, which are well-documented biological suppressants of root rot pathogens. Here is the metaphor that makes this legible. If wood ash is the key that opens the nutrient lock, coffee grounds are the crew that builds more doors. They do not deliver nutrients directly in the way that a fertilizer does. They feed the workforce, the bacteria and fungi that break down organic matter, cycle nitrogen, and make the soil a living system rather than an inert growing medium. In our 4-week trial, the coffee-amended pot showed the slowest initial growth of the 3. Through day 7 and into day 10, the seedling was visibly behind. This alarmed me when I was running the test. But by day 18, it had closed the gap, and by day 28, it was the tallest of the 3 pots by a margin of about 15%. The explanation is timing. The microbial bloom triggered by the coffee grounds takes 2 weeks to fully establish. Once it does, the plant has access to a dramatically more efficient nutrient cycling system. The slow start is not failure. It is the biological investment paying its setup cost. The application rate matters here. Coffee grounds should not exceed 15 to 20% of total soil volume. Beyond that threshold, the dense, fine particle structure of the grounds can compact, reduce drainage, and create anaerobic pockets where the wrong microbes thrive. An eggshell is approximately 94% calcium carbonate. That number, on its own, is impressive until you learn the second number, which is the one that changes how you use them. The average eggshell takes between 3 and 5 years to fully break down in soil under normal conditions. The calcium is there. The plant cannot reach it for years. This is the central misunderstanding about eggshells, and it is why so many gardeners have crushed them, added them to their beds, and seen no result. Not because the material is ineffective, it is not, but because the surface area of an intact or coarsely crushed eggshell is too small to release calcium at a pace that matches a plant's growing season. Dr. Tom Fernandez, professor of horticulture at Michigan State University, has demonstrated that finely ground eggshells, processed to a near-powder consistency, release calcium into soil solution within 4 to 6 weeks of application, compared to the multi-year timeline of whole shells. The mechanism is simple chemistry. Surface area determines reaction rate. Double the surface area, and you more than double the speed of dissolution. Think of an ice cube and an ice sculpture. The same amount of frozen water, but one melts in minutes, and the other endures for hours. An eggshell left in large pieces is the sculpture. Ground to powder in a coffee grinder or blender, it becomes the ice cube. In our trial, the eggshell-amended pot used shells that had been dried, then processed in a blender for 45 seconds. The resulting powder was incorporated into the top 2 inches of soil. By day 14, the plant was showing no obvious advantage in height, but it was significantly more robust in stem diameter and leaf color, both of which are visual markers of adequate calcium. Calcium is not primarily a growth nutrient. It is a structural one. It builds cell walls, stabilizes root membranes, and enables the plant to absorb other nutrients efficiently. The final measurement at day 28 placed the eggshell plant second in height, behind the coffee ground plant, ahead of the wood ash. But a measurement of stem thickness at the base told a different story. The eggshell plant had the strongest physical structure of the 3. This matters for the garden in a way that a 4-week test cannot fully capture. A plant with robust cell walls resists pests more effectively, handles drought stress better, and produces fruit with longer shelf life. Calcium is the mineral that makes plants resilient, not just tall. The 4-week trial ran each amendment in isolation because isolation is the only way to measure individual effects. But a garden is not a trial. And the most useful insight from this experiment is not which material won. It is what each material revealed about what the others cannot provide. Wood ash adjusts pH and delivers immediate potassium. It cannot build microbial communities. Coffee grounds feed soil biology and cycle nitrogen slowly. They do not affect pH significantly, and they deliver no calcium. Eggshells provide calcium and secondary structural minerals. They do not feed biology, and they have no meaningful effect on pH at typical application rates. These are not competing tools. They are complementary ones, and used together, sequenced correctly, they address 3 separate layers of soil health simultaneously. Dr. Stuart Diker, professor of soil management at Penn State University's College of Agricultural Sciences, describes soil fertility as a multi-factor system in which any single limiting factor can suppress plant response regardless of how optimal the other factors are. His analogy, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You can have perfect nitrogen levels, but if calcium is deficient, cell division slows and growth stalls. You can have ideal calcium, but if soil biology is suppressed, nitrogen never mineralizes into the form roots can absorb. The practical formula that this trial points toward: apply wood ash first, 2 weeks before planting, to stabilize pH. At planting, incorporate powdered eggshells into the root zone for structural calcium. At 2 weeks post-planting, side dress with coffee grounds to initiate the microbial bloom precisely when the plant's root system is established enough to benefit from it. This sequencing mirrors what a forest floor does naturally. Leaf litter adjusts pH. Decomposing organic matter feeds biology. Mineral fragments release calcium over time. The garden is simply applying the same logic with materials already present in the kitchen. One note on quantities. These are amendments, not fertilizers. Wood ash at more than 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet per year can push pH past the optimal range. Coffee grounds above 20% of soil volume compact and restrict drainage. Eggshells need to be ground fine to be effective within a single season. The materials are gentle. The discipline is in the dose. Nearly every gardener who tries eggshells for the first time adds them whole or in large pieces, rinsed and dropped directly into the planting hole or scattered on the soil surface. This is understandable. It is also the reason most people conclude that eggshells don't really work. Whole eggshells in soil are not a plant amendment. They are a multi-year geological process. The calcium inside is bound in a form that soil moisture and root acids cannot dissolve at any meaningful rate within a growing season. You will still be looking at those same shell fragments in 2 or 3 years when you dig that bed again. The fix is straightforward, but it requires one additional step that most people skip. Dry the shells completely. In a low oven for 10 minutes works well, and then grind them. A blender, a coffee grinder, even a mortar and pestle will do the work. You are aiming for a consistency close to coarse flour. At that particle size, the calcium begins releasing into soil solution within 3 to 4 weeks, not years. The same mistake applies, in a different form, to wood ash. Many gardeners apply ash on top of the soil and water it in. Wood ash is highly alkaline, a pH of 10 or higher when dry. Applied as a concentrated surface layer and wetted all at once, it can temporarily spike the pH in the root zone to a level that is toxic to soil microbes and causes a brief but damaging nutrient lockout. The correct method is to broadcast it lightly and work it into the top several inches of soil so it disperses before planting. That single step, grinding the shells, incorporating the ash, is the difference between a material that does nothing for a season and one that measurably changes plant performance within the first month. What this experiment revealed is not really about which material is superior. Wood ash did not beat coffee grounds. Coffee grounds did not make eggshells irrelevant. What the data showed, clearly, is that a kitchen drawer's worth of cast-offs contains 3 entirely different biological and chemical mechanisms, and that the soil, left without them, is working with a fraction of the resources it could have. What ties all of this together is the same principle that governs every healthy soil system. Diversity of inputs creates resilience of output. A plant growing in soil that has adequate pH, active biology, and sufficient structural calcium is not merely growing faster than a plant without those things. It is building differently, stronger cell walls, deeper roots, a metabolism that can handle the inevitable stress of a dry week or an early cold snap. There is something worth sitting with here. Every morning, most households produce all 3 of these materials as a byproduct of ordinary life. The coffee is brewed. The eggs are cracked. The fire, in the right season, leaves its ash. These are not gardening resources that require a budget or a trip to a store. They are the residue of living. And for most of human history, before the invention of synthetic fertilizers in the early 20th century, this kind of careful return of organic material to soil was not an alternative practice. It was simply farming. The most effective soil amendments are often the ones we almost threw away. If this comparison shifted how you think about what belongs in your garden versus your trash bin, leave a comment below. I would genuinely like to know which of these 3 you will try first, and whether you are planning to use them separately or in combination. Share this with a gardener in your life who has been buying soil amendments they might not need. And if you want to see more side-by-side trials like this one, subscribing means you will not miss the next one. Until then, keep your hands in the dirt.